As the city of Seattle is pretty much all but guaranteed to be the 32nd NHL franchise, once the team comes into play, the NHL is going to have to consider realigning the divisions at least a little bit to kind of even things out. In today's video, I have 3 different concepts I want to run by you to see what you think that the NHL should consider for realignment once Seattle enters the NHL. And that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and analyze all 31, soon to be 32 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, we're pretty much guaranteed that Seattle is going to be the 32nd NHL franchise. The hopes of the NHL and the group in Seattle is to come into play here during the 2020-2021 NHL season. So over the next period of time, as they prepare to approve the Seattle franchise, they're going to have to consider realigning some of the divisions, especially in the Western Conference at the very least, to kind of even the conferences out and even the divisions out moving forward by adding this extra team. I know there's a lot of people out there as well who's not convinced that Arizona will even be a team in a couple of years, and that they very well may have to end up being relocated due to the struggling fan base and arena issues. And then if that were to happen, the most likely landing spot for them would be Houston, Texas. Obviously, Houston, Texas would make a lot of sense to be in the Central Division as well. So obviously, if Arizona were to end up moving to Houston, that would solve everything as well. However, at this point in time, we can't guarantee that Arizona is going to move. So these 3 concepts that I've designed are assuming that Arizona manages to stay in their current location, and the NHL has to figure out a way to handle this with them in the Western Conference. So these 3 concepts I want to present to you today assumes that the Coyotes remain in Arizona and that no NHL teams as of today are going to be moving. One argument that's been presented to keep Arizona in the Pacific Division is that their biggest rival is set to be the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, both teams are geographically very close. They're both desert teams. I know at this point that they're not really strong rivals as of yet. Vegas obviously had a tremendous first season where Arizona's been struggling. One point that's been made in the comment section of this channel before was to have a real good rivalry. Both teams need to be on equal levels or very competitive at least. And so far, Arizona hasn't quite been able to accomplish that, at least in recent years. Although I do think they're taking steps forward and should be much more competitive moving forward here. So I do think the NHL has a good interest here to let that rivalry build, and having them in separate divisions would complicate that and certainly take away from that rivalry. As we know, the NHL wants to grow the game in the US due to the large untapped populations that don't have hockey as of right now. And when it comes to the TV ratings, they seem to be real big on NHL Rivalry Night, and it seems to do pretty well across the US on a lot of different markets for building up the league and creating more hype around a lot of these teams. So I'm going to present to you 3 other concepts, which kind of changes things up here a little bit, kind of shakes things up around the league, which is never a bad idea to do every so often anyways. And of course, I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below to let me know which one of these 3 concepts you would prefer and which one do you think makes the most sense for the NHL to seriously consider. So as I go through each of these 3 scenarios, I'm going to be placing a graphic up here on the screen to show you the full alignment of each conference, and we'll talk through them, each concept here one by one. So the first concept is one we mentioned off the top here, where it's the most simplest and easiest solutions. Which shows us here the Eastern Conference, which I'll show you now, would remain exactly the way it is today. You'd still have the Atlantic Division and the Metropolitan Division with each of the 8 teams remaining exactly the way they are today. Now, in the Western Conference, we'd only make a few slight and subtle changes here. The Pacific Division would still contain San Jose, the LA Kings, the Anaheim Ducks, the Vancouver Canucks, the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the newly appointed Seattle team. Now, the one omission from the Pacific Division that we have today is the Arizona Coyotes. We would show them moving over to the Central Division, which would include other teams like the Winnipeg Jets, the Nashville Predators, the Minnesota Wild, the St. Louis Blues, the Chicago Blackhawks, Dallas Stars, and Colorado Avalanche. So we'd only have a slight subtle change with Arizona moving to the Central, and of course the new Seattle team joining the Pacific, which would certainly be the least complicated of the bunch. But as I mentioned, the NHL is big on rivalries, and as the Coyotes continue to improve here and kind of build that rivalry with Vegas, I think it probably would be good for both teams long term to be in the same division here. Now the next concept I want to show you as well also includes the Eastern Conference remaining the same. Now this other idea I've seen tossed around on a lot of different social media sites, even through the comments of some of our YouTube videos that we've posted here, creating conversation before. So I want to see what you think of this other concept, which would have a little bit more movement in the Western Conference. Now, as I mentioned, this next concept also includes the Eastern Conference teams remaining exactly the way they are in the Atlantic and Metropolitan divisions. In the Western Conference, we would see a little bit more change, but we'd have Arizona stay in the Pacific Division. So the two divisions would look like this. We'd have the Pacific Division being San Jose, Anaheim, and LA. Of course, all the three California teams remain intact. We have Vegas and Arizona, which I know the NHL would like for them to be rivals. We would then move Colorado into the Pacific Division, of course joining the new Seattle team along with the Vancouver Canucks. So that gives you your 8 Pacific teams. So the Colorado Avalanche, which would kind of be your next closest team outside of Arizona, would move over to the Pacific Division. Now, of course, in the Central, you still have the Winnipeg Jets, the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, the Minnesota Wild, the St. Louis Blues, the Nashville Predators, the Dallas Stars, and the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, in that division, the main change is you've got the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames leaving the Pacific and joining the Central. Now, those Alberta teams are fairly central, really, if you take a look geographically speaking. So it kind of makes sense that it wouldn't be too disruptive travel-wise for the Oilers or the Flames or for the Avalanche joining the Pacific Division. So that Battle of Alberta remains intact as a rivalry, and you still get to build on the rivalry potentially between Vegas and Arizona as well. And you kind of shake things up a little bit with Colorado and Seattle now in the Pacific Division. So that concept is one we've kind of vaguely touched on here before, but as I mentioned in the past, I wanted to go into this a little bit more detail. So I'd love to hear your comments on that concept down below. What do you think about the Colorado Avalanche moving over to the Pacific, joining the new Seattle team, and the two Alberta teams, the Oilers and the Flames, moving over to join the Central? I do think there's a lot about that idea that does make a lot of sense as well. It kind of shakes things up. It keeps some rivalries intact. And really, overall, I don't think it really creates a whole lot of extra travel for any of the teams that are moving. Now, this last concept I want to go over with you to get your thoughts and opinions on is a little bit more of a radical change than the other ones I've already presented. This concept takes the Eastern and Western Conference and changes the divisions a fair bit. It breaks up each conference into a North and South division instead of the way they are today. Now, of course, they don't have to name them North and South. They could give them some other unique names like they have right now with the Central, Metropolitan, etc. But either way, it kind of breaks it up into a more of a North and South concept. So I'll now place that graphic up on the screen here and show you my concept. So as I mentioned in this concept, each conference is broken up into 2 divisions like they are today, except it's based on more of a North and South concept. If you look at the geographical locations of all the teams in the NHL and in each conference as of today, I don't think it would be overly complicated to kind of break them up into this concept here now. It kind of helps create some new rivalries while maintaining a lot of the old ones as well. So first, let's start here with the Eastern Conference. So taking a look here at the Northern Division for the Eastern Conference, you've got the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, the Boston Bruins, Buffalo Sabres, and the 2 teams in New York, of course, the Rangers and the Islanders. So from New York further north are all remaining in that North Division, where the other teams would comprise the Southern Division, being the New Jersey Devils, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Washington Capitals, Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Really, if you think about the breakup there between those 2 divisions, right now you have Tampa and Florida playing against a lot of those teams in the Northern Division, and that is a fair bit of travel where they play each other so many times. I do think there's enough teams further south between Tampa, Florida, Carolina, and if you look at geographically how they're not really all that far from many of the Metropolitan Division teams, I do think in some ways it does make more sense to place them in a division together. Now jumping over here, let's take a look now at the Western Conference breakdown here of their Northern and Southern divisions. The Northern Division and the Western Conference would include the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, the Vancouver Canucks, the new team from Seattle, the Winnipeg Jets, the Minnesota Wild, Chicago Blackhawks, and the St. Louis Blues. Now the Southern Conference would include the California teams of Anaheim Ducks, the LA Kings, and the San Jose Sharks, the Arizona Coyotes and the Vegas Golden Knights, the Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche, and the Nashville Predators. So again, it keeps majority of today's rivals intact in each division. It doesn't really create havoc when it comes to travel, and it kind of gives the NHL a nice way to kind of shake things up, create some new playoff rivalries, and just kind of, have some different change for once. We've had these same divisions for a long time, and we're getting a lot of the same playoff matches year after year. I think longer term here, a lot of fans would like to see things shaken up just to kind of create something different. So that is the third concept and most radical, as I mentioned. It involves the most change amongst all the things here that I presented here today. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments on these 3 concepts. When the Seattle team comes into the NHL, and we know that's pretty much a given, it's likely going to be in the 2020-2021 season. It could possibly be the year after that, but I know there are all parties involved are aiming for a 2020 launch date. So if that happens, the NHL has to realign. They can't just pluck Seattle into the Pacific Division, because then we still have an unbalanced league, and based on geographic location, they pretty much have to go into that division. So could they go with a really simple approach like we presented here in the first concept? Could they go with a slightly more complicated approach, and like we did in segment number 2, and kind of shake things up a little bit more? Or could we really shake things up like in the third concept here without creating havoc when it comes to scheduling, maintaining majority of the rivalries while building some new ones and getting some different playoff matches here as well? So of course, like I mentioned here a few times already, I want to hear your thoughts and comments down below in the comment section. These are just ideas, but it's something the NHL has to take a look at here. Since we're likely getting an announcement on the Seattle team around December the 3rd or 4th of this year, which is not that far away. We're around 2 months or less from getting the 32nd team announced. I do think the NHL likely is already looking at this, but of course I want to get your thoughts on what they should do as they get ready to announce this new team. If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31, soon to be 32 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.